Everyone, welcome back. In this episode, we're gonna start looking at how to extract our database, and mainly we'll do a little bit more cleanup and preparation for it. But if you have done the refactoring from the previous episode, first of all, I want to congratulate you because refactoring is not an easy task. It's something that you have to do, and I find it really enjoyable, and I feel I'm learning way more when I'm refactoring than when I'm actually writing code, because when you write code, you're generally trying to make it work and you're spewing your thoughts out into code. But when you're refactoring, you're trying to understand the structure of your application and where you're ultimately wanting to take it, and what trade-offs are you willing to take, etc. And it's a very methodical process, and it engages your brain. So if you sat through the previous episode, well done. In this episode, we are going to look at refactoring further. So let's go ahead and take a look at our graphs. And me crossing this out was a bit of a mistake because we still have some dependencies, but I wanted to feel good. So let's go ahead and do a bit of this. It's kind of crossed out, but not really. So let's assume that we're at this step. We still have. Let me put an arrow here. Like that. We still have a bit of this going on, and we will solve that later on. But primarily, we want to get here, and hopefully you understand the benefit of this. So again, I'll just you probably understand, but I'll just go over this again, because sometimes when you're transferring your application or you're replacing parts, you want to be able to replace. You want to be able to replace either only this part, or maybe you want to take these parts and move them somewhere else. And basically separating your application into these modules isn't necessary. You do not have to do it. It's something you do if you need your application to do certain things, because this takes time, and what we're doing here isn't needed. But I am teaching it just so you understand. If you ever have to do this in the future, you will. So if you have a question regarding why are we refactoring, why are we doing all this stuff, everything already worked. Well, we're doing it because you need to know how to do this in this field. So let's go ahead, see where we're at, and let's go ahead into our application layer, and let's start with the cart. So the first thing, we will go into our add cart, and this would be like one of the primary things that we want to separate and clean up, because we have a bit of session management going on. And mostly this is database operations, and this episode will only look at this service and try to break down into basically what the next episode will entail. I want to do something similar to a repository pattern. Let's go ahead and say public interface stock manager. Okay, and we will leave this for now. So first of all, let's go ahead and break down this method, because when writing code, you don't necessarily write it clean the first time. You usually try to get it work the first time, and this is what usually happens. So we get the stock on hold. So this stock on hold is something that we're editing here after we do the if statement. So this shouldn't even be up there, because there is a possibility of us not using it. So I'm gonna go ahead and move it down here to where it sort of belongs in this block. And this part right here, again, it really belongs a little bit closer to here. So let's go ahead and put it here, and let's take a look at this stock to hold, right? So we're passing the stock to hold ID here, but we really don't need it, because we're already grabbing the what's called stock ID from our request. So let's go ahead and replace this stock ID like this. And again, this is only sort of used in this area, so this is where I want to move it. Okay. So you want to group objects generally inside the function where they're being used. And now let's take a look at the next thing. So if we are taking a stock away, we want to add it to the session. So let's identify what parts are belonging to the database transactions and which parts actually belong to the service. First thing we want to find out if from our context we get this stock to hold, just first to check if we have enough quantity to actually hold this stock, right? So this is an operation in itself. We want to check if we have enough quantity. Okay, so let's go ahead and quickly we'll create a class that will be a stock manager that will implement from iStock manager, and we will all right, let's just implement the constructor because we will need to pass the application DB context. So let's go ahead and pass this here. Let's make the global thing here. All right, so again, the main task that we're trying to accomplish here before any sort of writing to the data, before we update anything in the database, we want to know if there's enough stock. So let's go ahead and check that, right? So bool enough stock. And what do we want to check? We want to check by the quantity and the stock ID, right? So let's go ahead and grab that, and stock ID and int quantity. All right, and now let's implement this and let's see exactly what we're doing. We want to check if whatever stock ID we have, do we have this amount of quantity? So let's go ahead and basically return. We're gonna go here and we are going to grab the first or default, and we are gonna grab where the ID equals stock ID, right? So we have our stock, and now what we want to do is we want to check that the quantity is bigger or equals to the quantity that we're supplying. And what this will tell us is if we have enough stock to actually perform this following operation. So now what we can do is let's go ahead and create an instance of iStock manager. So let's call it stock manager, and we'll say new stock manager and pass the context here. And we will essentially just say stock manager, do we have enough stock? Request stock ID and request quantity. Okay, and if we don't have enough stock, we want to exit and no other operations are going to be performed. Let's delete this line. And next thing we want our stock manager to do is put some stock on hold. Okay, so uh, essentially this is where you have to understand the separation between a service responsibility, where it's basically using the database to check if we have enough stock, and then database responsibility to update the stock. And basically you can strike a balance between what functionality you want to delegate to SQL or to Entity Framework Core, or which functionality you want to delegate it. In our situation, it's a little bit easier to delegate it to Entity Framework because it is such a heavy lifter. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and proceed. And what we're doing here is essentially putting stock on hold. So let's go ahead and put this in our interface, and we want to say, we don't want to say bool, we want to say void put stock on hold. And let's see what we need. Well, first of all, we really need the stock ID, right? So stock ID and the quantity. And I believe it is session ID that we need. Yeah, so we're using session ID here and here. So let's go ahead and put a string session ID. Okay, let's go ahead, grab this implementation here, and let's grab everything that we want here. Okay, so this is actually going to have to be a task. So let's replace the type with task, void, I'm going to put task here, and instead of a wait, I will just return the task here so we don't create the state machine. Okay, so going to the top here, stock to hold. This is the stock that we actually would like to grab here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's create a variable stock to hold, and I'm gonna say equals stock first or default right here. Okay, and we can actually simplify this by just going by saying this quantity minus equals and the quantity that we're asked from. Okay, and I don't think we're using stock to hold on anything else. I'll pop this down here so we can see it a little bit more clearly. Next thing is the session ID. So let's say session ID that we're passing here. And let me drop these two new lines so it's a little bit easier to see, like so. Next thing, let's replace this with stock ID, quantity. Next thing, let's replace this with stock, and this with session ID, and this with quantity. Okay, so this looks like it should work more or less. Let's go ahead, grab our stock manager, and let's put some stock on hold. Request stock ID, request quantity, and I will also have to grab from my session manager the ID as well. And I will await the whole thing, and I'll pop this to new line just so it's a little bit easier to see on my screen. Okay, so this whole thing is what the service is responsible for doing, and this right here, all this functionality, I'm basically delegating that to the database. Now, how much of this you want to delegate to the database is your decision, but let's go ahead. I will just try to take this a step into the future, and basically let's say that I'm going to be using a native SQL client, and I'm going to be writing my own queries to update the database. What would this then end up looking like? Well, first of all, I would do something like begin transaction, because I would like to be this an atomic transaction. If I don't know, the server falls over halfway through, and I have already taken off the quantity, but I haven't put actual quantity on hold, then this quantity just vanishes. So I want it to roll back, okay? And I don't want it to commit. So I want to do something like begin transaction, and what NT Framework provides us with is actual transactions in this sort of space. Okay, so I would do something like begin transaction, and then I will go ahead and start writing out something like update. I will say table name, and I will say set quantity. I would like to set it to quantity plus whatever parameter I'm going to pass it to, where ID equals whatever second parameter I'm going to pass it to, right? So this is what the query would look like. Next thing, I want to grab the stock on hold, and all I want to do is check if I have if I'm already holding stock like this. So to do that, I will do something like select from, and I would say count. So I want to know how much. Basically, this would return at least one. All right. So, and I would be grabbing this from stock on hold. So from this table, where let's say I will need two variables here. I will need to know the stock ID, which will be equal to the first parameter, and the session ID, which will equal to the second parameter that I'm passing. So if this will be more than one, I would then basically say stock on hold, and I would copy the same clause that I'm using here, and I would set quantity to equal quantity plus whatever parameter I'm passing. So this would have to be 0. I will drop this to a new line. Now let's pop this here. Whoa. And let's pop this here. Alright, so this is what the query would look like, perhaps. Next thing, if it would be otherwise, I would have to execute a different query, and this would look like insert into, I'm inserting into stock on hold, and I would want to insert stock ID, session ID, quantity and expiry date. And I would say values 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and these values will represent these values, and this is how it would look like. So next thing I would want to do here, essentially say the same thing, or sorry, not the same thing. Essentially, I would want to say update stock on hold. Well, this table update stock on hold, set expiry date to be whatever value I supply, where session ID, because this is all the stock on hold that we're getting here, session ID equals session ID, or rather whatever I'm going to pass. And then what I will do here instead of this is I will commit the transaction. Okay. And let me put spaces here. If you want, you can type these comments out. You don't have to. I'm basically putting this here to let you know what this will look like if it wasn't Entity Framework, and why I am actually able to confidently say, right, this belongs here, because this all looks like a database transaction that to be able to persist it to the database, right? So this is what will be needed to store this into the database. Now, there is one big point where I'm adding quantity, and these operations are being performed inside SQL, and I might want to separate this out further into essentially extracting all the data that I need first. So I would have only select statements at the beginning here. So I would extract all the data that I need. I would work on the data, and then I would pass the data back to a method, something similar to this, and then that would do only write operations. So I would not have this select. So this if statement would reside here, but I'm making it's about me making a conscious decision that, right, I am putting this trust on SQL. So I am putting a little bit of my shop logic into SQL. Okay, now that you will sort of know how the next episode will work like, I will leave this here and we will close this. And the first thing I want to do is actually clean up the project a little bit. So what we have inside infrastructure here, I want to actually move this infrastructure folder into the domain folder, and I will rename the namespace as well. So let's go ahead and say domain here instead, and I will rebuild the project and fix the namespace errors, if I get any. Alright, I have to delete this one. Just copied it. Okay, now I should get errors. Okay, cool. Is it gonna light up? Yep, there we go. So that's 1. 2. Yep, so just remove the namespace that is highlighted and import the session manager from the new namespace. This is essentially all I'm doing. Remove unnecessary use the new one. If you don't want to do this, we can actually, because this namespace doesn't exist, sorry, not this namespace, but let's actually just copy this statement here. Let's go to error list, and let's highlight this whole thing and press Ctrl H, and then at the bottom we can paste in the namespace that we copied earlier, and we can say entire solution, and then say replace all, which is Alt A. Okay, and then press yes, and that should take care of all the errors that we had. Hopefully there's gonna be no more. Yep, and that takes care of that. Okay, nice. So let me close all of that. Next thing I want to take care of is in the cart, this, where was it? This part right here, where we get the cart, and we're actually then querying the database. So we're not storing enough data in the cart. So again, this is just my mistake of just trying to get it to work, and rather not mistake. I was just trying to get it to work, And now that I'm looking at it a second time and I'm like, why is this like this? Well, I was just trying to get it to work. It's okay. And it is my responsibility to clean it up. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're doing. We're getting the cart from the database, and we will need the product name. So essentially the stock's product information and the stock ID and the quantity that we're storing. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we actually have. So into the models and this cart. Yeah, so the file is not named correctly. Let's go ahead and name it appropriately. Next thing, I will actually put this to the side here. And this is the way I usually do when I'm doing refactoring, so it's a little bit easier to see. We need product name, so let's go ahead and add that. So it's going to be a string product name. This is something, this value here is something that we can extrapolate. Real value is something that we should actually store. So let's go ahead and say prop int. Is it an integer? It is a decimal. So let's go ahead and change this to decimal. And let's say value. Okay. So another place that we're using it, so how we can find out if where we're using it, we can right click and press find all references, or press shift F12. But let's go ahead and press that and let's see what we're using it. So first of all, in my UI layer, we just go ahead and okay, so we're implementing it mainly in the session manager, where we're passing stock ID and quantity. So we don't actually have a lot of information. So let's see where we're adding this stock. And it is mainly, so we're not actually using this, we're going to be using the interface. So let's go ahead and see where we use add product from our interface. So find all references, and this is going to be in the add to cart. Okay, look, yes. So we can actually then ask for more information here. So we can actually pass it to the session. And what I would actually like to do is just add the whole object to the session. So let's go ahead and close all of this. It has become a little bit confusing. So let's close all that. Let's go into the iSession Manager, and where we add product, instead of this, what I want to do is just say pass this cart product. Okay, so cart product, and I'll name it cart product as well. This remove product can stay the same. So that now let's go ahead into our implementation in the UI layer. So infrastructure session manager, I will take this cart product and I'll put it here, and I'll say cart product. Now we'll need to refactor this a little bit. So let's grab the cart product, the stock ID, and if we have one, let's go ahead and again pass this bit instead of the stock ID here, and we're gonna just grab the quantity from here. All right, and then otherwise I want to add the cart product to the list and then save it. Okay, so that pretty much takes care of adding this cart product. Let's close that. Refactoring here is done. Next thing we will need to, when we do add the product to the cart, so add to cart, this is where we want to actually forge this product. So let's go ahead and see what we need for this. So var cart product equals new cart product, and where was it? Get cart, where we get cart, where we do this conversion. Let's go ahead and essentially try to keep the response function here. So we'll put this here, and we're getting it from stock. So this can actually go into our stock manager, right? So let's go ahead and move this. So what I want to do is grab this. So let's go into our cart product and see what information we're missing. We're really missing the product name and the value. All right. So what I want to do is because we still have access to the context, we can do this quite easily. So let's say var stock, the one that we want. So let's go ahead and ctx stock first or default, where we have request stock ID, and whoa, forgot to include lambda. Okay, so we do a proper comparison, and let's see what information we can grab from here. So whoa, like that, semicolon. So stock ID from the stock can be the ID. Next thing, the quantity will actually come from the request, and then the product name. Product name will have to come from the stock. Let me scroll down a little bit. It's easier to see. And we don't have access to to the product name here, but we'll have to go into the product and grab the name from here. So we will need to include x dot product. So let's import NC framework core package here. Okay, so we are getting the product, so we can grab the name, and now for the value we can grab the stock. And do we have the value here? We don't, so we will have to grab the value from here as well. And now we can take this cart product, pass it here, fine and dandy. Now this stock, let's go ahead and actually move this into our stock manager. So what I want to do is return stock. I want to say get stock with product. Okay, and I'll just pass in stock ID. Let's go ahead and create this function. So there it is. I will now grab all of this, and I will just return this. Let's give this a bit of formatting. Replace this request.stockid with just the stock ID. And now what we do is we can just grab this stock using our stock manager. So get stock with product, stock ID, and there we go. So essentially I have offset it now, the functionality that I have in my get cart to to add to cart, and it makes a little bit more sense to store the complete object here rather than retrieving and doing the doing whatever with it. It's a little bit confusing. I'm not sure. But yeah, I was just trying to get it to work, so that's all right. So now let's go ahead and return an enumerable of this, and the way we could do this is just go ahead, return cart list. So if we have anything from in the cart list, we can go ahead and select X, and hopefully I can just grab this, paste it here. Let's see what we're missing. We don't have the name, but we do have the product name now. We also have the value, and the value here, and stock ID, we have stock ID here, and the quantity we no longer need to get it as well, so all we need to do is get it from here as well. Alright, so let's remove this, and now thinking about it, if we go into the session manager implementation here, where is it? When we get cart, we don't really need a list because we're not going to be editing it. We only want to see it. We do all the appending here, so this can actually be an IE numerable. Now let's take this and place this here, and now we're gonna get back an IE numerable. And what we can do is this will actually either be something, so our cart list, or we can just go ahead, return a new list of cart product, and it will just be an empty enumerable. Okay, so now when we're going here, we can scrap this part, this if statement, and I will probably need to go to my to interface, so I session manager, and replace this with IEnumerable as well, so my interface doesn't crash. And once I have my IEnumerable here, I can actually just skip the variable as well. Grab this, put this here. Let's remove this and just return this straight away. Okay, let's format this a little bit. Like this. Will it move this? And it does. Another thing I would want to do is actually move this into its own extension method. So we can do this in the infrastructure as well here, because it sort of belongs, it's sort of what we do all over the application. All right, so let's go ahead and make a decimal extensions.cs. Okay, this will be a static class. Let's remove all the imports. I'm going to make a public static string, get price string, because we're actually getting a price and it's going to be a string. So we will be working on this decimal, and I'll call this value. And I guess we're calling it value, so it will probably make sense to keep it as value. All right. So now let's go ahead and see where are we doing this conversion. And let's copy this, paste this here, and I will replace x.value with value. And this is what we're essentially going to be evaluating to every time we call get value string. So let's go back into get cart, and I will say x.value dot get value string, and that should do it. Okay, so moving on, we can remove the context here, which we're importing. And if we can get rid of the context or database import here, but because in the add to cart we already have our stock manager, it makes sense to sort of add functionality to where it already is. So you can see we're segregating functionality in its areas where it sort of makes sense for it to belong, because it is already there in some sense. Okay, so let's close all of this. Let's go into cart, get cart. I think we covered this area. Yep. Get customer information. We covered this area as well. Get order. Okay, so for get order, let's see what we're doing. And when we get to cart, we are again repeating the same information. We're doing the same thing. And for a rule of thumb where functions should do one thing, this is really a bit of repetition rather than basically segregating to responsibilities. So let's see what information we have here that we can't put in our cart. So let's go into cart. Oh, not customer information. Let's go into cart product, and we have product name. We don't have product ID. Value we're multiplying by 100 because it is a decimal and product is int. Okay, so we are putting it in a VM because we're getting an order. Yep. Okay, makes sense. We can do this conversion, no problem. Product ID is something that we'll need to store. Quantity, again, we're getting it from the database. It's a mess. Let's go ahead and say public int product ID get set. Let's go back to add to cart. Let's find where we are creating our cart product. Let's say product ID. Let's move it to where we are already setting products. And it makes sense to sort of, what I like to do is ordering it in the same way it is here. So product ID, product name, value. I feel like value should be at the bottom. And so let's say stock, product ID. We don't need the navigation to get it. So there it is. Okay. So once we got it, we no longer need access to the CTX, to the context. Let's go ahead, keep the projection. What we will replace it with is the cart. So let's go ahead and all of this, we'll just paste the cart here and see if we get what errors we get. Okay, so ID for stock, we'll replace it with stock ID. Value, we can just replace with value. And quantity, again, we can just replace with x.quantity. And to list, do we use it in more than one place? Do we really need to call this to list if this is IEnumerable? Let's go ahead and actually grab this select, and we'll pop it here. The same thing that we sort of do with... well, let's see if it will format it for me. It does. Now this list of products, we can actually replace it with this and remove this here. And one thing I would say, what we actually can do, since we're always choosing to use the .select function when we get to get cart, let's actually see where we're referencing this. So find all references, and we're referencing it in two places, and in both places we're doing the .select. So let's go ahead and see what .select actually does. It wants us to perform on this, so it's a static function, and as a parameter, it accepts a function of tSource and tResult. Okay, so tSource in our case is always going to be a cart product, and tResult is going to be something that's expected, right? So let's go ahead. Let's just copy this and see what we can do with it, because essentially what I want to achieve is I want to get rid of this duplication of .select in both cases, and see if I can just grab this formula and plop it in here. So let's go into infrastructure iSession Manager, or actually let's go into Session Manager first, and let's see where we get our cart. So what we're returning is cart product. So let's put the function here, which I copied. And what we have here is the tSource. So let's import the function first using system. Okay, so tSource, this is something that we're going to be passing, and exactly what we're passing is our cart product. So most of the time it's just going to be the cart product, and what we actually want to remove is tResult. And the way we specify the type is this way. So now what we can do is basically return a linked list. It's a list, not a linked list. I'm glad I spot that. Okay, so now when we try to return this list here, what we can do is essentially use the select statement here. So we're offsetting and pass the selector here. This will essentially allow us to supply a select statement to this function here and grab whatever we need without actually specifying a select statement. We can just pass it to this get cart and convert it. All right, so let's go ahead and change our interface to accommodate this. What I will say is tResult here, and I will need to say tResult here as well, and we will need to provide a function, and we are passing in we're going to be extracting a cart product from our list, and we're going to be resulting a tResult type of result. So, and then we'll say selector. Okay, so now what we can do is we can just grab this function, pop it here, and get rid of the select statement. And we can do this in the other place as well. So I'm going to build this, see where I get the error. I get a couple of errors, but where's my error list? There it is. So let's grab this, pop it here, and remove the select statement. Nice. Let's see what else needs building. Okay, everything else is successful. So again, here list of products, we have removed essentially our need for the what's it called? Where's the context? There it is, for the database context in this function, because we have chosen to segregate the storage of more information of our cart product to when we actually add it to cart. So now what this change allows us to do is to get rid of the application DB context in two places. So let's go ahead and remove this here as well. And get order, we no longer need it because we are selecting it this way. Let's go ahead and close all of this. Let's go to remove from cart. Let's go ahead and clean this up. So this whole thing that we're doing here is not really the best way to do this, but let's go ahead and pick this apart. The main thing that bothers me is this all. We don't really need to basically mark a flag to say that we're removing all. We can still just pass all the quantity that is in the cart. Okay, so what this really allows us to do is to remove the element safely. So really, we might want to return the amount that's remaining here, or we might want to re-render the components. And re-rendering the components, I think, in my perspective, is the best option, and we will cover that as well. So let's go ahead and remove this all for now. This will get rid of this thing here. I will then go ahead remove all of this. Let's create a public function. So what I'm trying to do right now is extract the functionality that will go into our stock manager. Okay, so this will have to be a task for now, and what it's going to be doing is remove stock from hold. Okay, and what we'll need is int stock ID, let's big I, int quantity, and string session ID. Okay, so thinking about it, do we need this stock ID? Yeah, we do. Let's go ahead, pop this here. Next thing, we'll need the stock as well. Let's pop this here. And this stock ID is what we'll replace here. We'll replace the stock ID here as well. We'll replace this session manager, what we get here essentially, with session ID as well. And let's go ahead and pop these two here as well. So we're going to be adding the quantity that we pass here to stock. So quantity, and the quantity that we're subtracting will go here as well. Alright, and then the final things that we want Entity Framework to do is if the quantity has reached 0 on our stock on hold, let's go ahead and remove this. Next thing, let's just return this task of saving. Okay, and now what we can do is we can basically say remove stock from hold, request stock ID, request quantity, and session manager, let's get ID. And let's await on this. And what I actually want to do now as well is basically check if the quantity is more than 0, because if it's not more than 0, really, you're trying to pull my leg, buddy. So, I'm just going to return false here. Now let's go ahead and actually pop this into our, what's it called, interface in, where was it, add to cart. Was it add to cart? Yeah, it was right here. So what I want to do is remove stock from hold. So let's go ahead and grab it from the task to the end here. I will pop it down here, semicolon. Let's implement this function down here. And I will now just grab this function. And I will put it here instead of this one. Okay. So now let's go ahead and actually extract this as well. What I will do is I will do Alt-Enter, extract interface. What is this? Interface name stock manager. Stock manager. Okay. With an existing name type. Of course it does. Let's just move type to here. Did it get us extracted from here? Yes. What I will do is I'll delete the partial class part, and I will remove the name part here. Okay, and this probably made my add to cart partial as well. It did, so I'm gonna do that as well. I'm gonna remove that. Next thing, let's do the same for our stock manager. Move type to stockmanager.cs. Nice. So there is our two classes. So I'm going to take the iStock Manager, the actual interface, and I'm going to put it in my shop domain infrastructure folder. Okay. And iStock Manager, this hasn't actually removed the interface from here, but it did put it here. Okay, so let me close that. Let's remove the iStock Manager from here. Now I want to grab the stock manager, and what I want to do is actually put it in my database. So I'm going to take this stock manager. Oh, I'm going to cut it. I'm going to paste it here. And it has removed it here. Stock manager implementation is now here. Next thing, I want to go to add to cart. And what I will do is I will just grab the iStock manager. I'll replace it with the interface here. I will drop these down just so it's a little bit easier to see. I'll grab the stock manager, put it here, rename all this stuff. iStock manager, rename this, remove this, stock manager, and now let's just paste this everywhere. Okay, that should be alright. Now let's just not forget, any time we want something to be injected, remember that it has to be added to the dependency injection container. So let's go into our startup. I will go where we register our session manager, and I will do it right before it. I will add transient what was it? Stock manager, and the stock manager implementation is what I want to have here, and it just imported it static. That's not what I want. And I think the class still remains here, does it? No. It must be some build artifacts that is causing the issue with this, but let's use the... Okay. So when I extracted the stock manager, it has put it in a partial class. So let's remove this and add to cart is probably a partial class again. So Visual Studio is messing with me. So I'm going to remove the partial class again here. So startup, there's my stock manager. Let's add this. And the session manager, let's make it scoped instead as well. I'd rather have it scoped. Okay, so that should be okay. Now where I was removing stuff from cart, remove stock on hold, I will do the same thing here. I will just replace the context with the iStock manager. So let's go iStock manager, stock manager, create a global field, and let's call iStock manager here. I'll pop this to a new line so you can see it. Remove this space, and everything else seems fine. Next thing what I want to do is actually fix this up real quick because I have broken this functionality. Let me drop down all these services here. I will go into the controller and into the cart controller. For this remove all, since it doesn't exist anymore, I'm just gonna go ahead and delete it. And going into my pages, into the cart, where I have my remove all from cart, what I'll actually want to do is add a quantity onto this route so I can control how much I'm subtracting, right? So let's go ahead and add a slash here, and let's just say quantity. And int quantity is what we will pass as another parameter here, and we can just go ahead and say quantity here. Okay, and now going back here, and let's just go ahead and basically say, right, plus /1, since this is always going to be what's called removing 1. And I think a better thing would be to pass the quantity as a parameter here, which we will say plus quantity, and we will say if quantity is null or quantity equals undefined, then we want to set quantity to 1. Otherwise, right here is where I want to pass the quantity. And let's see the stock ID, where we basically append the quantity of the element. So what I want to do is I want to grab this element here. I want to grab the inner text, so I want to grab this quantity right here as well. And never mind this bit, we will get rid of this. And what we'll do instead is we'll call remove one from cart. And because it's no longer removing cart, one from cart is actually, let's say, it's just removing from cart. So let's go ahead and just pass the parameters here. And I think what I would rather do is have a variable here from cart, and I'll pass this here, and we can have the stock ID and quantity that we're going to be passing here. And the next thing is remove from cart, where we grab the stock ID and then we grab the quantity. We can call remove from cart, and we can pass the stock ID. This has to be a function as well. Okay. Let's see if anything's missing. Nope. Remove one. And this is no longer remove one. So let's just say remove. We'll say removed as well, since we're providing the quantity. Yeah. And here we actually, I'm gonna skip on passing the quantity since that was a rubbish idea. Let's say remove from cart, and I can pass stock ID, and I can say 1. Okay. Alright, so let's see how that works. Let's grab a product, grab 5 of them, we'll remove 1, we get undefined, let's refresh, we get nothing, we get nothing here as well. So I think something has went wrong. Okay, let's just see what we get in the console. So remove 1, 400. So let's see in the network what we get. Failed to remove from cart. Let's look at the output, what we get here. We don't see anything, so we're not throwing any errors. Which means we will have to debug. Okay, put a breakpoint here and let's debug. Okay, I will grab this product again. I have very few of them left. +1 still works. -1. See, we get the quantity 1 and we get this. Let's press F11, or no, F10, and now F11 to step in. Okay, so quantity is, So I am just a noob and I don't know how to do Boolean logic. So let's go ahead and change this to less than or equals 0, alright? So if it's less than or equals 0, we want to actually now, not add, not try to remove. If there is nothing to remove, alright, we shouldn't be trying to remove, okay? So let's go ahead and run this again, see what happens. Okay, let's grab this product. So we got 1, let me grab like 3, okay. Let remove 1, yep, it does that, remove. Okay, so the decrementation, where is it? It'll be my cart CS HTML. So this decrementation is all fine and dandy, but this is not really the best way to go about this. The best way to go about this would be to replace this HTML here. So we would want to pass in new HTML back to the browser, and we would want to update 2 things, primarily the cart and the product list of the cart. So we would no longer need this ID, so I'm going to scrap this. I would no longer need this ID, so I'm going to scrap this as well. Well, we will basically try to perform the same logic here. So let's scrap this, and I'm going to scrap this as well. And what I want to do is re-render the cart and re-render the cart view model. So to re-render the cart view model, it's quite simple. So let's go ahead and make another controller, and we will just say public I action result get cart component. Yeah, get cart component. And what we can do is go into components, cart, and we will grab the small one. So let's quickly check out what our component does. So in our view component, let's grab the cart view component, and it will need the get cart. So we're going to just need to get our cart and return the total value here. Yep, so I'm pretty much going to copy that functionality. I'm going to go into cart controller. I'm going to close everything else because it seems to be in the way. Let's from services get cart, and we will ask for get cart. Let's put this here, and for our view we will ask for components slash cart slash smart, like that, and the view name model. Yep, and now we actually want to return a partial view instead. I think we'll need to import link for this, and we do. Okay, so we just get the total value. We want to render the partial view. And the next thing we want to do is re-render our, where is it? No, cart controller, CSHTML. So this part right here. So the easiest way to re-render this whole thing would be to just, let's make a shared, what's it called, partial view. So I'm just gonna grab and call it cart partial. Okay, CSHTML, like that. And we can essentially just grab the model, the same model that we're using here, pop it into here, and then grab this whole thing that we have here, and maybe perhaps we would like to re-render this as well, because if we don't have anything in here, we might want to make an if statement, so we might want to re-render this whole HTML here. So we can go ahead, grab this, paste this into here. We don't want to try to re-render the JavaScript, so we're just going to grab this, and I will just say partial self-closing name, and we can call it cart partial. Am I spelling correctly? I think I am. Let's say model, and we can just go ahead and pass the model that we have. Okay, nice. Now the thing that we can do is actually give this ID, and since I'm confident I'm not going to have any more carts, so this is going to be just a cart, and perhaps I want to distinct it from the other ones, so let's call it cart dash main. Let's copy this ID, go into the small cart, and let's call this ID cart or cart nav, yeah, cart nav. And we would like then to do the same kind of similar thing that we have here. So where we get cart component, let's get another one here. Let's, for good measure, put HTTP get tags. And our convention is still controller action. So now we want to get cart, let's call it main. And we are still going to be grabbing the cart, but the model that we want, we can actually inspect that in the cart CSHTML. So whatever this is doing, we are essentially just going to pass that response there. So let's go to cart controller. I'm going to remove this part here. I'm going to rename this to cart, and I can name this cart partial, and I can pass the cart here. Okay, and this should be all right. Yeah. let's go ahead and close this. Close this as well, go into here, and now what we can do is call these two with Axios and essentially do the replacement of the what's called of the HTML from with the result that we get. So let's go ahead and say create a function. We'll call it update cart, and we don't need to pass anything. I'm going to say Axios dot get. Let's say slash cart slash get cart component. I'm pretty sure. I think there is something that allows Axios to make batch requests. I think you can look that up. I'm not gonna bother too much with that. Okay. So get cart component. Let's copy this, paste this, or actually not yet. We will, but not yet. So just for clarity, I will grab the HTML from res.data. And now what I want to do is the same thing that I was doing with outer HTML. I just want to go ahead and where is it? I think I should be able to remember. So var element equals document. I gave it get element by ID. I called it cart main because it was main, and this is going to be nav because it's a component. All right, and I want to grab the outer HTML and just give it the HTML whatever I'm getting here. And I can essentially do the same thing with my, what's it called, get cart main. So that was get cart main, and we are gonna update the main here. Okay, nice. And now all we have to do is once we're successful, we can just go ahead and call cart main, update cart, and call this here as well. Okay, let's run this, see what happens. Let's grab this test upload, extra large, seems like I have a lot of them. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab 5. Let's update 1, and everything broke as expected. Okay, so let's see what the first one did. So it has looked it up in shared pages / shared components. I guess because that is my fault, it kind of didn't find this component was no longer shared. I'm just gonna go ahead and drag it into the shared folder, and I want to share this component, and I'm hoping my actual component won't break. So I'm gonna recompile this. Let's go ahead and grab the extra one. Okay, press 1. Kind of. Get cart main broke this time. Model item passed into view of IEnumerable select list iterator, but this instance requires model of shop UI pages cart model. Okay, so we're passing a wrong model somewhere, and it's going to be get cart main. So let's go ahead and look into cart controller, get cart main. We're passing it into cart partial. So it's just this, but we're passing an IEnumerable. And let's see what this is. When we do cart, we get the IEnumerable. Okay, so because this was cart model, and okay, so we actually want the IEnumerable here. So let's actually replace this here. It doesn't have the reference to this object, so what I will do is I will go to get cart. I will grab this namespace. I'll just append it here. And now I will need to remove this model.cart. I'll just grab the model. And that should be alright. And let's just, for the sake of will this be, I don't want that. Do I want to enter it through that? Never mind. Let's just say if a model.count less than or equals 0, or rather, if more than 0. Then we let you to proceed to checkout. Okay. All right, let's recompile this again. All right. As I like to say, 20th time's the charm. Okay. And I guess this is the unlucky bit where Razor doesn't really support strong typing, and you're gonna get these type of errors. So this error was in card.cshtml. Now that we have changed the model that we're passing to IEnumerable, we're gonna need to pass model.cart to it. Okay. So let's go ahead and refresh this. All right. Let's give this a +1. All right. So the quantity here has updated, and the cart price has updated as well. All right. Let's remove one, and let's try to remove all. And has it broke? No, it has just not removed anything. Okay, so it's giving me an error. So let's see what it's doing. I think it's because I removed the index, or rather the ID, from where I'm getting the quantity. So I actually needed that quantity. So let's say stock quantity. I'm not sure why I named it that, but yeah, I want the ID to be stock quantity dash stock ID. Let's go into the cart partial, and where I have the quantity here, let's say ID stock quantity at product stock ID. Okay, give this a refresh. From 2, let's remove this. Okay, nice. So pretty much, let's see if we got our 3 back here. We do. So if I submit 1, I go back to the shop, I go back here, we have 2 left. If I come back here, I press 2. If I can add 1, and if I go back to cart, I increase, I go back here, I have 3 left again, but I'm on extra large, so it's working. Okay, and if I remove all, everything gets updated. Okay, so nicely done. I will actually stop here. So I think that was a okay little fix. Just as a note, this whole cart update thing can be done a lot smoother, but it's this is sort of, again, this is just an easy get it to work solution, because what we're doing right now, we are making a trip to the server to basically update the quantity, and then we're making 2 trips again to fetch the new elements. So we're essentially making a trip there, back, and then 2 more trips there and 2 more trips back. So it's 6 trips in total, and ideally the perfect solution would be 1 trip. All right, that's all that you, well, not 1 trip, 1 trip there and back. All right, so really the ideal solution is 2 trips there and back. So this is, again, could be an indication of why this is not a perfect solution, or not the most optimal one. But this is something that we're gonna stick for now because it works. Okay, and in the next episode we'll continue actually resolving the problem of extracting the dependency on our shop.database from our application layer. Okay, hopefully you're enjoying these videos. If you are not, leave me a comment. If you don't want to see these refactoring videos, and if you think they're boring and you'd rather me spend my time on making other content, leave a comment. Other than that, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, subscribe. If you have any other ideas of what I should cover, leave a comment as well. And as always, see you in my other episodes.